What's up, folks? So I thought I'd try my hand at a few reaction videos. So strangely enough, for someone who works as an electrician and I have to crawl into roof spaces and everything like that, I'm actually quite claustrophobic when it comes to the thought of spelunking and cave diving. Spelunking is what I actually call it when I get up in a roof to do some work. But it doesn't seem to bother me in the roof of a house or something like that. But the thought of being in caves just really freaks me out. So I started watching about 30 seconds of this video and decided to do a reaction video to it. So without further ado, let's see how I react to this.
Mossdale Cave Incident. It was June 24th, 1967, and 10 cavers were about to enter Mossdale Cavern to help clear some of the deeper passages and map them out. The two leaders of the group had already explored this cave before, which reassured everyone else. This particular cavern was known for its tight spaces and the very few areas where a person could fully stand. After a few hours inside, 4 of the cavers realized how difficult the cave actually was and decided to return to the surface.
Right, so this seems like the 4 smart guys straight away. But
They noticed a cloudy sky, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The remaining cavers continued their descent until they reached the far Marathon Passage, which measured only 18 inches by 12 inches, with a small stream of water flowing along the bottom. Everything seemed...
What were they thinking? I mean, I like surfing big waves, I like riding dirt bikes, I love skateboarding, I love my extreme sports, but this is just... Nah, man, nah.
Seemed to be going well, and the group on the surface soon noticed that it had started raining, so they took cover. Initially, the rain did not seem concerning, but the cavers...
Wait. So this is about as far as I got before. So the rain didn't seem concerning. They're in caves that you literally got to crawl or if not squeeze through, and the rain did not seem concerning. Well, I guess they were the 4 inexperienced guys, right? So, fair enough.
Side began to notice rising water levels. When the water became alarmingly high, they decided to end the day's work and head back, even though they were still 3 hours from the entrance. Meanwhile, the surface group spotted something terrifying. A lake of water had formed around the cave's entrance. The cavers inside had no idea how much water was about to flood the cave. The surface group ran to get help, while the cavers frantically tried to reach higher chambers. However, the water continued to rise, pressing toward their faces.
My God.
Rescue...
So basically the water would be flowing against them as they're trying to get out, is what I'm hearing here. Ooh, I'm getting the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it.
And hundreds of volunteers worked tirelessly, pumping water out of the cave and pumping oxygen inside, hoping that the cavers had found a safe chamber. Unfortunately...
Wait. They're pumping oxygen inside, therefore probably creating an airlock. I used to work on oil rigs, and when you have oxygen pumped down into a pressure system, you create what's called an airlock in your pump. And the only way to get that out is to force more water in.
Every one of the cavers drowned. Shaft sinkhole tragedy. It was May 28, 1973, and a group of 9 diving experts had planned a dive at Mount Gambier's shaft sinkhole. This sinkhole had a unique feature. There was only a tiny opening leading to a cave.
So the Mount Gambier sinkhole, as far as I know, is like a very popular free diving place where people like to go real deep on one breath.
With a lake 20 feet below. From this opening, a beam of light went down into the cave and onto the lake, which was extremely helpful for the divers' orientation. This beam was visible throughout most of the cave, unless divers ventured too deep into one of the 2 side branches. Everyone initially agreed that they would stay within a 200-foot maximum depth range, so they could remain in the main chamber and still see the guiding light. This was their only...
I mean, at least they had scuba gear, right?
Plan. On the second day, however, 4 divers planned to go to the western section of the cave, aiming for a depth of 250 feet, which would have been a new record. This was deeper than initially intended and posed a significant risk because in 1973, divers were still using regular air cylinders rather than mixed gas tanks. For this reason, they had to be more cautious as they went downwards because nitrogen narcosis might have settled in. As they went down, the increasing pressure would have pushed the nitrogen into the bloodstream, producing a state of consciousness that is similar to when people are drunk. Keep in mind that these divers were not very experienced in cave diving. They were more accustomed to standard open water scuba diving. This added even more risk to their plan. They started going downwards into the western section of the cave, and one experienced diver noticed that nitrogen narcosis was kicking in, so he immediately went back out. Several of them followed him and went back to the surface as well, but 4 of them kept going, determined to set the record and get a quick look.
So half the group turned around and said, fuck this shit. And the other half just said, oh, we'll keep going. I feel like something like this should be like one in, one out, all out.
Before resurfacing. After a minute or so, the group at the surface became concerned, realizing the 4 divers would soon exhaust their air supply. A few returned to the cave to find them, and they discovered a flashlight and a camera on the bottom, but no trace of the divers. There was a problem that we haven't yet mentioned: silt. The movements of the 4 divers stirred up the long settled silt into a sand cloud that would take a lot of time to settle back. This reduced visibility to less than an arm's length, removing any hope for orientation for the underwater divers. Without being able to see anything, oxygen running dangerously low, and nitrogen narcosis kicking in, the 4 divers drowned.
Man, that would be a horrible way to die. Blind, suffocating, freezing cold water. 70s, eh?
Jacob's Well tragedy. It's November 23rd, 1983, and 2 students from Texas State University, named Richard and Clark, are about to enter Jacob's Well, an underwater hole that leads to an underwater cave. This hole seems relatively shallow, around 25 feet, and many people try to touch the bottom and then come up. However, this is just a deceiving appearance because it actually leads to another underwater cave with 3 chambers. The first 2 are relatively open and easy to get through, but the third one has a really small squeeze to get into it.
Yeah, but is there any air in there, or are we talking like with tanks, or are we talking freediving here? I mean, this sounds crazy.
Manage to squeeze through, you'll enter a room that is 10 feet tall, and you'll see a really small hole at the farthest edge, too small to pass through. This small tunnel was just 2 feet in diameter, and 2 years prior, 2 people died in it because after they managed to get through.
All right. So, let me get this straight. There's still 2 decomposing bodies in that fallopian tube of a passage that's already got a blockage, and they knew about it. It's crazy.
A rock slide filled with gravel blocked them inside. Now, getting back to our 2 students, they were fairly experienced in normal diving, but not in cave diving, and they were trying to get their instructor certification in open water diving. Their instructor, Don, was an incredibly...
How is that open water? Open water diving's open water, like 60 feet and deeper. Like, I mean, that's... I don't even know what to say.
Skilled and experienced diver, and he was the one who removed the 2 bodies we just talked about. He used to constantly warn everybody to stay away from Jacob's Well since it's deadly, and he even tried to cover up the small hole that leads to the 4th chamber with some cement. But other divers reopened it and left a message that said, "You can't keep us out." Don himself almost died in Jacob's Well.
It's like, here, I'm putting this here to let you know, this shit's fucked up. Don't go through here. You won't come out. And then, like, get down there with some kind of underwater jackhammer and like, and then they leave a sign there and everything. Oh my god.
When he tried to enter the 4th chamber, a gravel slide trapped him in the tunnel. He almost resigned himself to death. His tank was empty, and he had swallowed some water when his survival instinct kicked in, and he started rapidly moving until he cleared enough gravel to escape. When he did, he saw his diving colleague extending a regulator for him to breathe. As he started resurfacing, the air inside his body expanded until he reached almost 4 times his...
Yeah, it came up way too quick. It's one of the things I learned working on the oil rigs is when a gas bubble, like about this big, is 2 kilometers down, by the time it gets to the surface, it can be pretty much the size of this room and create what's called a kick. And when you get a kick, you get this massive explosion of pressure, of fluid and gas and everything coming out of the drill string from the base of the oil rig. And it's some scary shit, believe me. You don't want to kick.
normal body size. By the time he broke the surface, he was screaming in pain. His belly was huge because his stomach had completely ruptured. These stories caught the attention of Richard and Clark, who wanted to take a look for themselves,
do it.
even though
Yeah.
they didn't really know much about cave diving. On November 23rd, 1983, they went into Jacob's well and reached the third chamber, where the small hole was located.
No.
Richard removed his tank to get through the hole and started going in while holding his tank. When Clark removed his own oxygen tank and tried to get in, he saw Richard's face and noticed Richard didn't have the tank with him anymore and was suffocating. Clark quickly reached for the regulator and gave it to him, letting him breathe again. They started passing the regulator back and forth as they made their way out, and somehow they managed to get through the
Man, that's nerves of steel, huh? I mean, props to him. That's a lot of stupidity, but nerves of steel.
tight squeeze of the third chamber. They then began making their way toward the exit until a terrifying sound caught their attention, a clank from their oxygen tank. Not only did this mean they'd hit a wall with the tank, so they were going the wrong direction, but it also meant the tank was almost empty. They realized they'd run into the false chimney in the first chamber, a tunnel that looks like it leads to the surface, but is actually a dead end. Clark managed to swim back to the surface and
The term dead end just took on a whole new meaning for me. Dead end. Dead end. That's fucked up.
gasped for air after covering an incredible 75 feet in a single breath. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Richard, who remained behind and drowned. When Clark called the police for assistance, Don the instructor himself showed up and was stunned to see his students there. Gollum's Cave.
Wait.
It's
When they called the police for assistance, the police said, "Fuck that shit, you're on your own."
August 18th, 2005, and a group of 5 friends decided to venture into the Gollum Cave, also called the Cave of Death because of how dangerous it was. They reached
Hey. Why not go spelunking in something that's called the Cave of Death? I mean,
the entrance at 3 a.m., and one of the friends decided to wait for the others outside. They encountered their first problem when actually trying to get in, as they had to crawl through a small pool of water. After that, there was a fork going left and right, and they chose left, which led them to
this is some Lord of the Rings shit, eh? It's just like, you take the left path, and you get enlightenment. You take the right path, and you freeze your balls off in some fucked up squeezing chamber of death.
another small pool of water. This seemingly innocent pool, however, actually led to another section of the cave through an underwater tunnel. The tunnel itself was really small, just 3 to 4 feet in diameter, and to get through it, you had to be completely submerged. This meant only one person at a time could
Oh,
go
no
in,
tanks.
and they had to swim about 15 feet. One by one, they started plunging into the pool of water to reach the other side of the cave, and once they made it, they discovered a section with about 3 feet of airspace. From the perspective of the friend who stayed outside, there was no sound or light.
From the perspective of from the friend outside, he was safe. So all was good, right?
Coming from inside the cave, and after a while he started to get worried. He went into the cave himself, but heard no noises and saw no lights. Not sure what to do, he first called some friends who had experience with caving, and then called the police. He couldn't have imagined what was happening inside. The 4 friends who went in probably realized that the 3 feet of airspace they'd reached had bad air, which is a term cavers use for air that doesn't have the normal
H2S.
balance of gases, meaning there's more carbon dioxide and less oxygen. This reduces your ability to think, move, and breathe properly, making the return swim through that narrow tunnel super risky. They tried
Yeah, so I mean, I went up to the Andes once and looked at this glacier that overhangs a mountain, and you're like 2-3 kilometers up, and the effect that the thin air up there has is prolific. Hey, like you do not function properly. You can't think right. You can't speak. You can't breathe right. You can't speak right. It's really full on. It's really full on. So I can understand this.
to get back out one at a time, but the first person who went underwater was unable to find the exit hole before running out of breath. That happened because the increased carbon dioxide messed with her ability to hold her breath and think clearly. After 30 to 60 seconds, the second person went in and found the first one, and so on, until all of them got stuck in the tunnel. The police arrived and tried to pump in oxygen and pump out water, while family and friends waited anxiously outside the cave. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. The bodies were later recovered, and the cave was eventually closed off with cement. If you want to discuss this video,
I wonder if someone went to the Cave of Death and started chipping away with the with a jackhammer and said, "You cannot keep me out." Ah, man, that was crazy. Crazy. Alright, well, that was my first reaction video. I completely found this at random while I was eating my dinner just then. Got about 30 seconds in and thought I would try my hand at this. So if you enjoyed this, please give it a like, comment as much as you want, whether you think I should do more of these. And thank you so much for joining me. Until the next video, peace and one love. One love.